Hey everyone, welcome to this section. So here we are going to discuss regarding Palo Alto Firewall security policy overview. So we know that whenever we configure any sort of security policy, we should know certain basic rules and principles involved while configuring those security rules in a proper way as administrator, because we would be either allowing a traffic or blocking a certain traffic, thinking multiple criterias based on your business requirement, and those traffics will travel between multiple zones. So you can say that we have got the green one being as a trust zone, and the outside world as your untrust zone. So any traffic that travels from trust to untrust zone and vice versa, the Palo Alto Firewall will inspect those traffic via a component called a security rules or security policy, right? So if you look into the Palo Alto Firewall, the graphical user interface, when you log in, you find that under the policy section, you have got a certain security policy which is there by default. So this is the policy which I've created earlier, like for allowing internet access from a source zone which is labeled here as a trust zone, or you can say inside zone, for a particular source subnet for 10.1.1.0/24. and you can see we have got under destination, we have got the destination zone listed as untrust, and the destination IP address could be in any address, but we have other criteria also that we can write down in your security policy, right? So for example, let's say I have a security policy which is there inside my firewall configured. Let's say I want to delete that. Okay, so if I want to delete this particular policy, so I can click on this and I can just say delete from the bottom option. So you've got in the bottom of the page, you've got multiple options as add a security policy, right? So when you add, you can add a security policy rule. Likewise, other tabs are you can select a security policy, right, and you can delete that particular policy. You can clone that particular policy to another copy of it and then modify it. For example, if I clone it, I can go ahead and place this particular cloned security policy after this particular security policy rule name. Okay, yeah, I can move up, move top, all those options are given here. Move those security policy to a certain place wherever I want. Okay, so let's say I click on OK here, so I can see that I've got a security policy which is cloned for my internet access rule, and the policy name automatically appear as internet access -1. Okay, now if I want, I can go ahead and I can click inside and I can modify any of the component whatever I want. Okay, so let's say I want to delete both of the security policy. So what I can do is I can just select that particular policy which will be highlighted. Let's say I selected policy number 1, which is this is the sequence number. So I select the sequence number 1 and I click on this delete option. Okay, and let's say I click on yes, delete this particular policy. Likewise, I delete this clone policy as well. Now whenever I want to revert these changes, so I didn't commit my changes yet, so if I want to revert it back, so you can see there is a option right after commit. Okay, there is a drop down, so where you can either save the changes to your candidate config, or you can revert the changes whatever you have done. So if I click on revert the changes, then I can see revert all the changes which is made by all the administrators, or I can revert the changes made by a particular admin. So let's say I revert all the changes because I don't have multiple admins here, and click on revert, click on close. You can see that the policy appears back to me, right? Not the clone one, but the default policy appears back to me. Yeah, I mean whichever I have deleted, that appears back to me. Okay, so okay, let's say I delete the security rule for time being and I create it new for the first time. But before I create any new security policy, we need to understand that there are certain default policy which is available here, marked as intra-zone default and marked as your inter-zone default. Okay, so as the name says, intra-zone it means within the same zone, right? Within the same zone. So I have got this inside or the trust zone here. Okay, so let's say if this Linux user wants to communicate with this Windows user, they are part of the same zone, so they can communicate, right? So if I have two interface of my Palo Alto Firewall, ETH1/1, ETH1/5, I put them into the same zone. So any traffic that traverses between the same zone, Palo Alto will allow them to communicate, right? But any traffic which is inter-zone, that means traffic traveling from one zone to another zone, Palo Alto by default has got a security rule which says inter-zone default to be denied. So any intra-zone traffic, which could be under the source section, you can see any zone having any IP addresses for any user for any device category type, right? Going to any destination, but destination here it is intra-zone, so that means within the same zone. Going to any address, any device, any application, any service port numbers, the action is allowed. So intra-zone default, it is allowed, but for inter-zone default, the same thing, it is denied. So traffic traveling between the different zones will be automatically denied. Okay, now the important point is these are the default security rules which you have in the Palo Alto Firewall, and you cannot modify that, or you cannot delete that. So let's say select one of the rule, you can see all the options on the bottom, like delete or clone options, they are grayed out for me, right? I can click on this move option, but again the move options are also grayed out for me, right? I can click on override. So if I want to make some changes to this particular policy, I can override that. Likewise, let's say inter-zone default, again if I select it, I don't have any other options to modify, but I can override this. So when I click on override, I can see that I can, let's say I can go to I cannot change the name or whatever, but I can apply some tags here if I want. Click on action, I can actually go and let us say allow it if I want. I can add some profiles or any groups or profile settings to it. I can enable logging or enable log forwarding for this particular security rule. So those things are performed, those things are allowed. Let's say I allow it and click on OK. You can see that this inter-zone default policy right now will have a particular symbol, which means that it has been overridden by the administrator, and you can see that I have allowed it. It was initially denied. Okay. Now if I want to revert those changes back, so I can just click on this, I can revert my changes and click on revert, so things will go back to the normal stage. So you can see that, yeah, so my things has went to the default stage where I was previously. So let's say I will create a security policy for the very first time, and we will encounter what are the different options that we have to work with. So let's say I go ahead and I delete this particular security policy what I have. So select the internet access one, I delete this particular rule, say click on yes. All right, now if I want to create one, so let's say I want to allow this particular traffic from my source zone, which is a trust zone, to the outside to my untrust zone. Let's say the users who are part of this particular subnet 10.1.1.0/24, which means any of these particular users, the router which is part of this particular subnet, if they want to communicate from the inside zone to the outside world, I want to allow this particular traffic. Okay, so whenever there is a session which has initiated from the trust zone and the session is destined to the untrust zone, that means the traffic will be allowed by the security rule. On the other hand, the return traffic will be automatically allowed, right? So for this particular session, so if this user is trying to reach to anywhere in the world of internet, okay, let's say it is trying to reach google.com, the reply traffic will be automatically allowed by this particular firewall. Okay, but any traffic which is getting initialized from the outside and this traffic is trying to arrive on the inside, that means traffic is getting sourced from the untrust zone and the traffic is destined to the trust zone, if I don't write any security policy, it will match my implicit policy where the traffic will get denied. Okay, because by default the inter-zone policy says it is denied. All right, so I hope this particular points make sense. and clear to you. So let's go and just create one fresh security policy and understand how that can be made, and then we'll write down some key points. So let's say I go to my PFW1, click on the policy. Under policy, you have got multiple options like security policy rule, which you can create. You can create NAT policy rule separately. You can create QS policy rules, policy based forwarding rules. For VPNs, we will be creating decryption rules, etc., tunnel inspection rule, application override rules, authentication, DOS protection, SD-WAN component rules. So there are multiple options what you can face, right? Let's say I click on the security rule tab, okay, and I click on add option from the bottom, and what options I see. So I see that I've got a general option. Whichever options I see which is highlighted in red, that means those are my required options, or you can say the mandatory options to fill in. Okay, so they must be filled in with the proper values. So let's say I give a name. It is say allow internet access trust to untrust, right? So I write this as a security policy. Now regarding rule type, if you click on rule type, you can see there are three types of security policy rules which you can create. One is called as universal, one is called as intrazone, and one is called as interzone. Okay, so what do you mean by that? So universal is where it does not depend regarding the zone. So you can call in the source section. So over here you can see that you have got universal over here. So if you select this universal option, that means in the source zone you can call both the trust zone as well as the untrust zone, right? And also in the destination zone you can also call the trust zone and the untrust zone. Okay, so you can actually work with both the zones in your universal policy rule type. Okay, if it is intrazone, if you select intrazone, that means the source zone, say for example in the source zone you selected as trust, that means in the destination zone you must select the zone as trust. Okay, or basically we'll see that if it is the source zone is selected as trust, automatically in the destination zone it will be selected as trust itself. You will not have any option to change that. Likewise, if you select the source zone as untrust, likewise in the destination zone automatically you will have this automatically selected as untrust. Okay, if it is interzone, as the name says, if the source zone is trust, then the destination zone you can choose as untrust, right? But in the destination zone you cannot keep the same zone as trust. That is not possible. Okay, so this is very important for all of you to understand. So whenever you are working with a security policy rule, right? So let's go ahead, and if I look into universal, right, I'll talk about tags and all those things later. You can write some audit comment if you want. Let's say I selected the universal as a rule type. Source zone, let's say I select add as trust. Source address, let us say for time being I keep it as any. Source user any, source device any. Click on the destination. Now remember, in the source you selected the source zone as trust. So in the destination, since the rule type is universal, so destination zone can be either trust, or you can select untrust as well. Okay, so in the source you can also select untrust as well. So it will allow you, right? So it does not depend on any zone specific stuff, right? So it will allow the traffic to communicate from any zone to any zone, right? And you have got the option to select multiple zones when you are configuring the rule type as universal on the source and the destination zone configuration. All right, likewise if you look for general, if you look for the type as intrazone, okay, and then click on the source. Let's say I delete this, and let's say I select add, and I select the source zone as trust, and I select the destination zone, and automatically you can see that the options are all grayed out for me, right? Because the destination zone should automatically be taken as the trust zone itself. Okay, so let's say I keep it as any, right? I keep every conditions as default. And if I just click enter, you can see that the source zone is taken as trust. So since it is intra zone, so destination it automatically says it is zone as intra zone, so within my same zone of trust zone, right? Likewise, if I select the source as your let's say general, rule type as your interzone, and then I go to source, I select the zone type as trust, and a destination if I select, and if I want to select my zone type as trust, the same zone, but the rule type is selected as interzone, where I am defining the rule type as interzone, source is trust, destination zone is also trust. Let's keep every conditions as default. I click on OK, and it gives me an error. It says that, hey, since the zone type is interzone rule, you cannot do that, so you need to have a different destination zone. That means I have to go to general, source is trust, destination should be a different one, so let's say it should be untrust. Okay, and then I keep rest of the parameters as default, let's say, click on OK, and this will be taking place. So you can see the source zone as highlighted as trust and the destination zone as untrust. Okay, all right, so let's create a policy here which will allow the traffic from inside or the trust zone to untrust zone, allowing internet access. So let's say I create a policy in such a way that my inside subnet is 10.1.1.0/24. So rule type is let's say interzone. Okay, source zone is trust. I selected that. Source address, I can be specific. Normally it's good to be specific for the source addresses. So you can create an address object over here, or an address group object, where you can place multiple subnets inside an address group based object. Or let's say I can create an address object. So already I created earlier, so it is LAN address object is created earlier. If you want, you can create a new one. So let's say address, then give a name as, let us say, LAN address 10.1.1.0, something like that. Give a description of your choice. Type could be IP net mask, IP range, IP wildcard mask, or FQDN. Multiple types are supported. Let's say select IP net mask and give the subnet and the CIDR. Okay, I can define tags if I want. Tags we'll discuss later, and click on OK. So you can see that the LAN address is selected over here. Okay, and yeah, destination, regarding before destination, say I can also be specific for a particular user ID. So I can define a particular user ID, which could be a pre-logon user, or a known user, or unknown user, or I can select a particular user ID over here, which we'll discuss later. But as of now, I am generic to any user, and also I can be specific to a particular device type. Okay, regarding, let us say, I can select a user John based on a device, let us say Windows. Okay, when I can be much more granular while writing that particular security policy rule. Likewise, in the destination field, you can define the zone as untrust. Since my general, it was interzone, so destination, I will define a different zone. So I defined here as untrust. Destination address, I selected as any address, so I'm keeping it as open to the world of internet. And application, now any application, which means I can be very generic to any application in the world. But if I want, I can be specific as well, where I can click on this add button, and I can see in my local Palo Alto Firewall database, I have got bunch of applications that I can select, right? For example, I can allow the traffic for YouTube. Okay, and YouTube has got some dependency of sub applications as well. I can select that if I want, right? Let's say YouTube, I can select applications like Facebook. Okay, I can select applications, let us say social networking, something like that, which is part of Facebook is part of that, right? Say news, if I look for news, right, I can see live news chat, so like that, right? So I can create multiple applications, whatever I want. Okay, according to my choice, I can do that. Let's say I be open right now, and I select any as of now, so I can be any application. Service or URL category. So for example, those applications will be based on certain port number. So I can define, I can just tell that, hey, whatever applications you are trying to reach, they will all function based on their default source and destination port numbers of TCP and UDP. But if you want those applications, if it is running on a custom port numbers, you can also go ahead and add that, right? You can add a different service port number if you want, based on TCP or UDP, okay? And define that particular port numbers choice if you want. So let's say I select as of now the application default and action, as there are multiple actions that you can see, right? I can either allow this particular traffic, I can deny this particular traffic, I can drop this particular traffic, I can reset, send reset information to client, send reset information to server, or send reset information to both client and server, right? Now each of this information plays a unique role. If we just hover around, you can see what options it is doing. So if I say deny, it says block, it will use application deny action. If I say allow, it will allow the traffic transparently. If it is drop, then it will silently drop and it will send an optional ICMP unreachable message, right? So if I select deny, so what will happen is if the user is trying to send any traffic through this particular Palo Alto firewall, so if this user is trying to send any traffic through this particular Palo Alto firewall, right, and the policy, it is actually deny, right? So you have given a deny condition over here. That means the Palo Alto firewall will simply block this particular traffic at this interface itself or at the source zone itself, and it will not send any notification to the sender, right? So any ICMP unreachables or any sort of notifications will not be given to the sender. So because of which the sender will not be knowing it, and sender will keep on retransmitting those packets again and again, right, to get connected, and it will continue be getting dropped on the Palo Alto firewall interface, right? Likewise, if you give the option as drop, okay, rather denying, let us say if you selected the option as drop, so drop will basically silently drop, and it will send optional, you have got a parameter called a send ICMP unreachable message. So you can select that and you can receive this ICMP unreachable message at the sender side, okay? That means if this user is trying to reach to the outside world, okay, and I selected the option as drop here, so basically, and drop with an ICMP unreachable stuff sent, or this ICMP unreachable option is allowed, then what will happen is it will silently drop the packet, and this ICMP unreachable messages will be given to the user, okay? All right, so likewise, if you have other options, like you can see that other options like the reset options, which will send back the TCP reset packet back to the client, okay, or TCP reset packet back to the server, or TCP reset packet back to both the client and the server, right? Likewise, let's say I allow it as of now, I can see log at session and log at session start, so I can log this particular traffic at the session. Once the TCP or the UDP session has been completed, I can log this traffic, and likewise I can forward this log to any third-party log receiver by creating a syslog profile, okay? And other settings, like I can actually apply schedule policy. I can actually define this policy to work for a certain period of time, okay, or might be for a particular day, a particular week, or I can define some QoS marking to my particular policy. I can also define multiple security profiles, like for example, if I select profiles over here, I can enable antivirus check, I can enable vulnerability protection check, anti-spyware, URL filtering checks, file blocking checks, data filtering checks, as well as wildfire analysis checks. So I can actually go ahead and subsequently enable multiple security profiles to my and add those to my security rules, okay? As of now, I am not doing it. I'll discuss profile later, okay? And likewise, you've got a usage section over here, so you can actually see the usage basics, usage activities, right? Applications and usage based on past 30 days, and how much amount of bytes you have sent and received, etc. So let's say I click on OK. So this policy gets created for me. So you can see that I've got a allow internet access from trust to untrust, source zone trust, destination zone is untrust, source address is that source subnet of 10.1.1.0, destination address is any user, any device in the source, any device, any application in the destination having a default port numbers, and the action is allow. And I've not added any security profiles yet. And you can see that I have got other columns as well, like the option columns over here, right? I can check for the hit count, last state, first state. That means when this particular rule will be matched against certain traffic, I can see those hit counts of those packets getting matched. Yeah, and I can see the when it is getting when this policy was created, when this policy was modified, and all those different options, right? So let's say I go ahead and commit this. So if I commit this changes, so what will happen is this inside user will be allowed to reach to the world of internet, right? Yeah, so let's let the commit process completes, and we will do the testing of that inside user trying to reach the outside world. So let it happen in the backend, the commit process. So let's make some key points for all of you so that you can remember those key points regarding security policy. All right, so this is security policy overview. So as I've told you, the Palo Alto Network Firewall security policy, it will contain set of rules that will control the traffic, or you can say control the traffic flow through the firewall, determining which network connections are allowed or denied based on specific conditions. Okay, so these policies are really essential for enforcing any security measures which will prevent any unauthorized access and ensure that your network remains always compliant in your business environment. Okay, so what are the key components that we have inside the security policy? So key components of security policy rules. Okay, so first thing is you have got a rule base. Okay, so rule base, basically it is nothing but it is the security policy which consists of the ordered rules that dictate how traffic is handled. So you will have multiple rules that you will be creating, right? So you will be creating multiple rules, say rule number 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can have multiple conditions. Let's say you've got some deny condition on the first rule, you've got a drop condition on the second rule, you've got a allow condition on the third and the fourth rule, right? So if any packet is trying to traverse through this particular Palo Alto firewall, that particular packet will be matched against this particular security policy rule base, and it will be evaluated from top to bottom, right? From top to bottom. So all this rule number will be evaluated against top to bottom, and the first match, whichever policy is like the first match, that particular rule will be applied. Let's say rule number 2 is the first match, became the match, so that rule action will be applied. Okay, so keep it simple. Yeah, so it will have a rule base. Likewise, the second point would be the policy rules have got a structure, right? So what is the structure? I mean, each security policy, when you write down, it should follow that. So that means you to define the name of the security policy, so give a descriptive name to the security policy. Then to define the source zone and the destination zone, that is must. You must define that. Defines where the traffic is getting originated and where it is trying to go, or which is the destination of this particular traffic. If you define the application where the traffic is destined to, or which applications the traffic is going to get connected. So defines which applications, which could be, for example, HTTP based application or SSH application or telnet application, etc., etc., right? You can define, you have to define service or port numbers. That means whether those applications are running on the default TCP UDP port numbers, right? Default TCP / UDP port numbers, or you can define here the custom port numbers of your choice. So might be you are running SSH application but on a different port number, rather 22. You're running a different port number, let us say on 45. Okay, so in that case you could define that custom port number under service and ports, as I've shown you earlier. Likewise, you can be specific for a particular users. That means you can allow particular filtering, allow traffic filtering based on user ID, based on user identity, by the way, which is called as user ID. You can be very specific to allow a particular traffic from a particular user ID itself, right? And you can have multiple actions, as you've seen, right, that you can take. So you can allow the traffic, you can allow, basically I can say action, and I can say the actions being as allow. That means it will go and permit traffic to pass. Then the other action could be either deny, or you can say drop, and you know the difference between both of them now. So deny will automatically deny that particular packet, but it will not send any notification to the sender, and the sender will keep on retransmitting those particular packets back and forth. And drop is basically it will silently drop the packet, and if you enable that ICMP unreachable, so that ICMP unreachable will be sent to the user. Okay, so I can say blocks traffic. Okay, and you can play with reset. That means it can send TCP reset messages, right? Reset messages to terminate connections. So either reset could be at the client side or at the server side, or you can send TCP resets to both, right? Third thing is you have got implicit policy in the security rule. So the implicit policies, as you know, so by default, the Palo Alto firewalls will have an implicit deny all rule at the bottom of the rule base, as I've shown you, and meaning that any traffic which is not explicitly allowed will be automatically blocked. Okay, so if no rules are found a match for a particular traffic, then that particular traffic will automatically be getting blocked. Fourth one being adding security profiles. So you can add multiple security profiles for your conditions, like you can add up antivirus profile which will scan for any malware, scan for malwares in your traffic, whether you are sending or receiving. Sorry for that, 1 second. Okay, antivirus. Then we have anti-spyware. I will discuss these things later, but just a short note here, which will detect and prevent any sort of spyware. So I can say detect and prevent spyware. You can add up vulnerability protection profiles, which will block any exploit attempts by any attackers. Okay, you can add URL filtering policies, which is very important. URL filtering policies or profile, right? So which will restrict access to any malicious or any sort of unwanted websites, or you can say categories of websites. Okay, You can work with file blocking based profiles, which is also important. It will prevent any unauthorized file to be getting transferred. So you can say prevent any unauthorized files to be transferred, that is uploaded or downloaded. And likewise you can play with data loss prevention, or you can say DLP profile as well, okay, which will protect your organization sensitive data to be getting leaked. So protect organization sensitive data. So likewise, step number 5, you can do policy enforcement and logging. So policy enforcement and logging is also a feature. So the logs can be enabled on any security policy that you create, and it will be enabled to monitor the rule hits and the traffic behavior. And you can add any sort of integration, right, with any PanOS log viewer, any third-party SIEM or Panorama that you can add for doing centralized management, right? So there are multiple options that you see. Yeah? Likewise, if you think about the best practices, so what is the various best practices to follow? The various best practices, first thing is, I will say use least privilege principle. That means, only allow the necessary traffic. Based on your business requirement, okay. Always try to do segmentation of your network with zones. Segment network with zones to improve, security. That is very important, because that inter-zone traffic is by default blocked. Whenever possible, try to implement application ID and user ID. So be very, very generic or specific for your traffic flow towards a particular application or sourced from a particular user profile for granular control, okay. And last but not the least, make sure that regularly review and update the rules to remove any unused rules or any outdated policies, okay. So these are the important parameters that you must remember when you are working with security policy, right? So yeah, I hope it is clear so far. So I have allowed here right now a generic rule. So it says that, hey, allow internet from the source zone, which is a trust zone. So any IP from this particular subnet will be allowed to reach to the world of internet, right? So I've allowed that. So if I go to my Win server, Win client over here, okay, and see what is the IP address that particular client is having. Just give it a sec for it to load. So if I go to the command prompt and if I type here IP config, I can see the IP specified here is 10.1.1.10 and the default gateway is 10.1.1.2.0.1. And if I see ping to www.google.com, so it can reach. So since in the security policy I've allowed any application, that means ICMP based traffic is also getting allowed. And likewise, if I take up a browser and try to access any web pages, let's say some pages from social media, some pages from video streaming categories like YouTube, some news pages, everything will work fine. Let's see when that loads up. Let's give it a sec. Okay, so now let's say from here, if I try to reach facebook.com, likewise I try to reach youtube.com, likewise say I try to reach cnn.com, right? So I can see that, I can see the home pages. Yeah, it's loading just because the internet connection is a bit slow, but yeah, so I can see the home pages are getting loaded up, which means that I can reach to any of these particular URLs, right, from this WinPC, as well as if I try the same from the Linux client as well, I can log into that particular client device as well. Just give it a sec. Okay, so I've clicked on this terminal, and if I just type here ifconfig, so it should show me the current IP address that I have over here. Just give it a sec. This Linux is, I need to wipe it a bit. So let's say it is acting a little slow. Let's say I go to this Win server, okay, which is part of again my 10.110/24 subnet. So on my Win server VM, if I look for the IP address, so if I just type ipconfig, I can see the IP is 10.1.1.16, which is from the same subnet. Gateway is 201, which is my Palo Alto Firewall. I can ping to DNS, Google DNS, which is working fine. And likewise, if I want to reach to any web portals like Facebook, should be working fine. Yes, YouTube is an example. That's a cnn.com. So everything is working fine for me. That means, all these users from the trust zone is able to reach to the outside world through the through the through the Palo Alto Firewall, and this Palo Alto Firewall is able to match against the traffic against the security policy. So if I just do a refresh to this particular page, you can see that I've got so many hit counts given here on the right side. So you can see that, hey, 3434 is the amount of hit count which I have, right? Yep. So you can also verify. So if I go to monitor and regarding this logs, under traffic, I can see that from trust to untrust, that Win server having an IP of 10.1.1.16 trying to go to destination 8888, it is allowed, right? It is allowed. Section is allowed. So I can see those logs as well. All right, that means both these particular users are able to reach to outside world. Okay, so let's say I write down some sort of strict policy. Let's say I have some security policy rule task over here. So first task is, let's say, allow only Facebook and YouTube from the Windows client users, okay, or Windows client PC, which is running on 10.1.1.10 IP address, okay. And number two, let's say block Facebook access from the server VM or server PC, which is having an IP address of 10.1.1.16 as we saw. Okay, so I've got a couple of unique policy that I need to write down. So first of all, think that I am denying the server not to access facebook.com. So I've got the deny rule over here, and I'm allowing only Facebook and YouTube from the Windows 10 client. Okay, and number three is anyone else from 10.1.1.0/24 network, which is from that trust zone, are allowed to reach any internet applications. Okay, that's your target. So let's say whenever you see any block rule, okay, I would recommend you to keep it in the rule order. Okay, so I'll be writing this particular block Facebook access from the server PC in my rule order number 1, because rules are always processed from top to bottom. So any block, any deny rule, it is always good to write in the first lines. Any allowed rules are always good to write on the bottom lines. Okay, so that's the best practice. Okay, so let's say I go to my PA firewall, I go to policies, I click on security policy, I write down, so this is kind of anybody can access anybody, which is kind of the rule which I have already. That means 10.1.1.0 can access anywhere in the world of internet applications. That means it is already satisfying my third task. Okay, so I write my first task, which is block Facebook access from the server PC. So let me write down one rule over here which says add block Facebook access from SRV, right? Block FB from SRV, right? Something like that. You can keep universal, that's not a problem. We'll discuss tags later. So source zone is again trust. Source address, I need to be very specific. If I don't create any address object, that's fine, but I can just give the IP address here as 10.1.1.16, right, /24. That's the IP address of my Win server. Regarding source user ID or source device, I'm keeping it any. Regarding destination zone, should be the outside or the untrust zone. The destination address is any, because I'm not sure about what IP address it will hit to. So destination address, destination device is any. Applications is where I can do the filtering over here now, right? So I can, instead of any, I can say you are blocked to access Facebook. So I just type here Facebook, right? So Facebook, any Facebook is actually blocked for you to access, right? So which is the first thing. And you can see that when you want to block Facebook, it depends on multiple rule bases, right? MQTT, RTCP, RTP base. You can actually Google that and find out the information about it. So your job will be to select everything, and you can have to select to this add to current rule. Okay, so all those things will be selected under Facebook. Okay, so there are dependencies of Facebook to use those rule bases, right? Yep. So service or URL category, I'm keeping it as application default. Action should be denied, and I can log it at the session end. That's it. So click on OK. The point is, this rule will appear in the second line, right? I want to make sure it goes to my first line. So what should I do is I can select this particular rule. I can either drag and drop. Okay, I can just drag and drop before one, that is possible, right? Or best way is select this particular rule, and you have got this on the bottom of the page, you have got this move option. So click on this move, and you can say move top, move up, move down, move bottom, or move to certain position, right? So if I say move top, just click on the first option called as move top. So this rule will be at the top of the line. Okay. Likewise, if you have, let us say, 10 rules in between, so you can use this move down or bottom arrows to move the rules one line at a time. Okay, or you can move to a selected position, to a selected rule number as you want, right? So right now this rule is in the first line where it is saying denied, and my other task, so it is task 1, allow only Facebook and YouTube from Windows Client PC 10.1.1.10. So let's do that. So let's add another rule. So allow FB and YouTube Win Client, right? Or I can say Win Client. So universal default, source is your trust zone, destination source address is that 10.1.1.10 IP. So I just define here the IP as 10.1.1.10/24. I'm keeping the user ID and the device ID as default, destination zone as untrust, destination address, destination device is kept as any. Application which I want to allow should not be any, right? I only want to allow, as per the task, I want to allow only Facebook and YouTube, right? That means I should be very specific where I'm allowing. Click on add, click on YouTube, search for YouTube, all right, and search for, you can see YouTube depends on Google base, all right. Add to current rule, and also add for your Facebook, okay. Facebook depends on all those rules, so select everybody and add to current rule. And it is always good to allow DNS, okay. It is always good to allow DNS, so search for DNS, just search for DNS, okay. So DNS is always allowed. And under service we are keeping the default port numbers, action is allowed, and logging at the session end, click on OK. So now this allow FB and YouTube is sitting in the second line, okay. So deny is on the first line, allow for FB and YouTube only for the Win client is on the second line, and the dependencies are given here, and allow internet access rule is also given here, right, which is for any of the other users. So let's go ahead and commit those changes and verify that. So let the commit process complete successfully. Let's wait for it. Right, my policy is committed. So let's say I test, let's say from this Windows client PC, if I want to test allow FB and YouTube from Windows client. So let's say I go to the Windows client and let's say I want to refresh my facebook.com, and if I want to refresh my YouTube, okay, so you can see that right, so that should work fine. So YouTube is actually loading up, Facebook is also loading up, and if I try to reach, for example, cnn.com, just low, nothing but just low. If I try to reach anything apart from Facebook or YouTube, that should not work out, right, because that it's not allowed in that particular rule order. Yeah. So yep, so I think it's clear. So you can also verify the same in your monitor tab under your traffic logs, and you can see that what it is happening, right? If it is trying to reach any particular destination website, which policy is getting denied, which policy is actually allowing that particular traffic. So we'll discuss more about this in the later part, but yeah, always it's good to verify from the traffic logs, right? Yep. So there is one more concept that I want to discuss here, called as the shadow rule concept of your security policy. Okay, so let me write it down for you. So for your Palo Alto Firewall, you've got a concept called as shadow rules, right? Shadow rule in security policy. So what do you mean by that? Okay, so it's a very simple thing. So let's say that I have allowed a particular traffic. So I was very granular, right, where I have allowed a particular traffic. Okay, so let's say I was having some traffic condition. Let's say I have got a security policy written in my Palo Alto Firewall. The security policy says source IP is any. Okay, source zone is any. Okay, destination IP is any. Likewise, destination zone is also any. Okay, and say let's say be specific, like the destination zone is untrust. Okay, and say the source zone is trust, but my source IP destination IP is any. Okay, and say the action, it is allow. So I've got a policy which is in my sequence number 1. Okay, so in sequence number 1 I've got a policy says that any source IP coming from the trust zone, okay, any source IP coming from the trust zone going to any destination IP going to the untrust zone, the action is allow, right, for any applications, right? Let's say I similarly I just write down my second policy right below that. Okay, I say that hey, my source IP is 10.1.1.1/20 or say 10.1.1.10/24. okay, and it is trying to go the source zone is trust. Okay, and say the destination IP is any, and the destination zone or since I wrote here SZ, let me write here DZ, destination zone here as untrust. Okay, and I define the action as allow. Okay, suppose I write this particular policy, right? That means what is happening is I've defined here that any source IP from from this particular trust zone going to any destination IP going to an untrust zone, action is allow. And right below it I'm writing another security policy which says, okay, now if this particular user is sourced from the trust zone is trying to go to any IP from the untrust zone, okay, action is allow. That means the first rule will be called as a shadow rule for the second one. Okay, the first rule, this one, will be called as a shadow rule, because anyway this rule is automatically allowing this particular traffic that is mentioned in the rule number 2. If you closely notice, right, the rule number 2 traffic is automatically getting allowed via rule number 1 policy itself. Okay, so that is the reason the rule number 1 becomes a shadow rule for the second rule. But in case I just make this action from allow to say deny, right, I just make this action from allow to deny, in that case the rule number 1 is not a shadow rule. But the point is, it is not a right placement of rule number 2. So what I want is 10.1.1.10 traffic from source as trust zone going to any IP untrust zone, action should be denied, so that should be placed in rule number 1, right? So this particular traffic should be placed in rule number 1. That means they should actually swap this particular rule in that case, right? But the other one that I've told you, if the action is allow and if the first rule always supersedes the second one, then in that case the first rule will be called as the shadow rule. Okay, so for your better understanding, so let's say I clear all. I hope it is understandable. Okay, so if I go to my PA firewall, if I look for the policies, right, and let's say I write down a policy where say in rule number 3 I have got allow internet access from trust to untrust. Okay, and let's say I write down another policy which is very similar to rule number 3, or let's say rule number 3 becomes a shadow rule. So say this is shadow rule example. Okay, source is your trust zone. Source address, say it is 10.1.1.10/24. User device could be anybody. Destination zone is your untrust zone. Destination address is any. Application, say for example here application is Google, right? Application is Google, say Google base. I should, one second. Yeah, Google base. So anywhere in the any applications of Google, right? And say I add DNS. Okay, so I add Google and DNS over here, and service default port numbers. Action, say it is allowed. Okay, and I click on OK. That means, you know, if I try to commit now, so I've got a rule which says that, hey, 10.1.1.10, you know, if it is trying to reach to DNS or Google, it is allowed. And just rule number 3 is also the same thing, right? Rule number 3 is actually allowing any IP from 10.1.1.0 subnet to reach anywhere, to anywhere in the world of internet. It is allowed. Okay, let's let the commit process completes. Just wait for it. So the configuration got committed successfully. So you can see that, you know, there are certain, you know, notifications given here, right, for rule shadow. So you can see that. So allow, you know, FB, YouTube, and allow internet access, you know, those are should be, you know, those are the rules that are actually shadowing some other rules. Okay, those are the rules that is shadowing some other rules. That is the reason it is shown over here. Okay, just to make you understand. So that means, you know, this particular allow internet access rule, it is shadowing the other rule. Okay, now similarly, you can also look for, on the bottom there are multiple options that you see. If you want to enable, disable certain rule, I told you about add, delete, and clone. The default policies, you cannot delete it and all, you know that. So let's say I want to select the shadow rule. I can disable that. Rather deleting this, I can just, you know, disable this particular rule for time being. I can re-enable this whenever I want. Okay, or this rule, I can actually use that move option and, you know, move to the extreme top of this rule, right? So it is rule number 1 now. I can select that and move to the extreme bottom of this particular table, right? And likewise, I can move by one security policy. So let's say move bottom, I selected. So let's say move up by one line. Okay, so all those things I can do that, right? So let's say I select it and say move to bottom. All right, yeah, so you can also export this particular rules in either PDF or CSV file. So you can export this rule in CSV or in PDF format, right? So might be for auditing purpose, or you might have some 1,000+ rules for your organization. If you want to, you know, just want to export this in CSV or PDF, you can do that. And generally we do that for any sort of audits that happens, right? You can click on this highlight unused rules. So with that, you can see which rules out of the configured ones are currently not used, right? Or any traffic did not match this particular rule as of now. So it will show you with some different, you know, graphical options. Yeah, you can reset the rule hit counters. So you've got, you know, certain hit count you can see on the traffic that were matched. So you can reset those on selected rules, or reset for all the rules. As an example, I can reset and you can see the hit counts become 0 for all the rules, right? There is another feature called as test policy match over here. So when you click on test policy match, let's say this is one of the fantastic thing, you know, Palo Alto has, where you can proactively find out that if I have got a, you know, traffic pattern, which particular security policy can match against this particular rule. So let's say security policy match. So let's say from trust zone traffic going to untrust zone, source IP, say it is 10.1.1.10, source port, let us say whatever, destination, say it is going to 8.8.8.8, destination port, say it is 443 as an HTTPS traffic. You know, if I can give other parameters as well, you know, be specific to source OS or vendor, click on execute, so I can see, you know, which rule it will actually go and match, right? So it says that, hey, I've got a rule over here which is say block FB from SRV. You know, this particular rule will be matching against this particular traffic. Okay, so if this traffic goes to 8.8.8, so yeah, this traffic will be matched against this particular rule, because here only block FB is allowed, but anything else is, you know, only FB is blocked, but anything else is allowed. So this particular first rule will be the right match for this particular traffic condition. All right, so yeah, that's one of the things that you can look for. And also, you know, for example, on this particular, you can adjust this particular columns. Okay, whenever you want, you can adjust this particular columns by clicking on this particular first in the sequence number column. Just click on the arrow, click on the columns option. So whichever options you do not need it in the, you know, rule base to see, you can actually hide those. For example, I don't want to see when it was modified, when it was created, you know. I don't want to see the rule usage first hit, the last hit. Okay, I don't want to see, let us say, the rule type, you know. So, and accordingly, I can go ahead and adjust the columns, and you can see that whichever things you have filtered, those will be hidden from you in the policy base. All right, so I think it is clear as of now regarding the security policy, right? The foremost thing in this security policy, what you should know is regarding security policy groups. So how do you actually go ahead and, you know, group your security policies, or I can say grouping of security policies. That's an important concept again. Okay, so you can just make a group of your security policy based on multiple, you know, functionalities, right? There could be think like this, you know, your organization will have, you know, multiple departments, right? Your organization will have multiple departments, and for each department you can write down different types of rules, right? So you have got a department, say this is sales, right? Sales belongs to you, a subnet called as an example 10.1.1.0/24. You've got a department called as marketing. Marketing works on a subnet, let us say it is 10.220/24. You've got a department called as finance, and it belongs to a subnet of 10.330/24. Likewise, you've got a department which is say IT, that is part of 10.550/24. Okay, so think in that way that I've got 5 specific subnets. Now for each particular department that is belonging to each subnet, you know, I can create different types of rules based on my requirements, right? So let's say sales department are not allowed for any social or any, let us say, any ICMP based access, so they cannot ping to any of the destination devices, right? Let's say marketing devices are not allowed to access any FTP, telnet or SSH applications, as an example, right? Finance department not allowed to access social networking pages, sites. Okay, and likewise IT department are allowed to access any applications except mark department resources. So you might have some granular policies requirement like this in your organizations, right? So whenever you are doing this, let us say I'm doing this based on my department, but think in your organization you can write down security policy based on multiple criterias. Okay, so in that case, it is always good to group the security rules based on, let us say, the functional categories that I've defined here. So for me, it is functional categories as sales, marketing, finance, and IT. Okay, so what can I do is I can actually go ahead and create certain security policies based on those rules, right? So let's say I add, just for example, okay, I'm just adding this is for sales policy. Okay, as an example, just I'm giving here source zone is trust, source address 10.1.1.17/24. let's say I'm just giving 10.110/24. okay, destination as untrust, destination address is any, right? Application is any, right? As an example, I'm just giving action, say it is drop. Okay, make sure, like, this is one rule I have got for sales, right? Sales policy. Likewise, I'll have a rule for marketing policy, right? So I've got a rule for marketing. I'm not following the one that I've written in the document while explaining, but I'm just writing normal conditions over here. So marketing from trust, source address, say it is 10.2.20/24. destination is going to untrust zone, destination address is any, application, for example, SSH, say telnet. I'm just giving an example, right? These two applications having default port number, action, say it as deny. Okay, likewise I've got a marketing policy, right? Likewise I've got a policy for finance, policy, right? Where I can write down the source zone as trust, source address as 10.330/24, destination zone as untrust, destination address as any, application, let us say Google base, application, say Facebook, as an example. Okay, so default categories and action as, say, deny. Click on OK. Right, so let's say I've got, as an example, I've got three policies, one for sales, one for mark, one for finance. Okay, and might be under finance, I need to create multiple policy, right? I want to create multiple policy against finance, I want to create multiple policies against sales. So right now I only have one policy for each, right? I've got one policy for sales, one policy for mark, one policy for finance. But tomorrow I want to keep, let us say, 10 policy under finance, right? 10 policy under mark and 10 policy under sales. So in that case, how do I do that? So I have to create, three containers or three groups, one for sales, one for mark, one for finance, and for each of those containers I will actually go and write down the respective policies, right? So just to make you aware that what I'm talking is very simple. That means my job tomorrow is I will go and create 10 policy for sales, 10 policy for marketing, okay, and 10 policy for finance. Right now I have got only one each. So tomorrow what I need this, that means tomorrow I should go ahead and create three groups, right? So this each group will be labeled, this is my finance group, this is my sales group, and this is my marketing group. Okay, now under finance I will go ahead and write down those 10 security policy. Under sales I will write down those 10 security policy. Under mark group I'll write down those 10 security policy. Now how do I do that? That's the important catch. That's the reason it is always important whenever you have got large requirement like this, you can go ahead and group those security policy based on your functions, right? So hope you understand. So let's do that. Let's make it easy to understand now in configuration. So yeah, so you have got to create the groups. So before you create the groups, what you do is, you need to go ahead and create something called as tags. Okay, so when you click on objects, you see there is an option called as tags under the menu, right? So click on this tags and you have to create the tags. So click on this add button, right? You can just give a name. So this is the tag for sales group tag. Okay, let's say I define with some color. Let's say sales is lime color, right? Some comments, sales tag color lime. Click on OK. Likewise, I'm adding a tag for mark. So mark group tag, say marketing group, I define a color as maroon, and let's say I define the name as mark tag as maroon. This is optional, but just I'm writing it, the comment. And I have another which is the finance group tag. Okay, color, say it is say midnight blue. So finance tag blue. Okay, now you made those tags. Now the tags can be linked to certain objects or certain parameters, right? So what you can do is, you can go to the policy, right? And for marketing policy, let us say the first one is sales policy, right? Click on the sales policy. So under sales policy, in the general section, you have got option called as group rules by tag. Okay, where it is by default as none. What you can do is just select that and just see which particular tag suits it. So it's a sales policy, so I select that sales tag. Click on OK. Right now, similarly, I click on marketing policy. All right, again, group rules by tag under the general column. So click on that and add the marketing group tag assigned to it. Likewise for finance policy, same stuff, under general column, group rules by tag option, and select the finance group tag. Click on OK. And once you have done this, right, let's go ahead and commit those changes and see some different options. So I've got the tags assigned to the individual policies over here. Okay, let the commit complete operation and we'll see that. All right, so the commit has taken place successfully. So now I can see that you can choose one column over here. Under columns, just select that group option. Okay, if it is not highlighted, so you can see that there is a group column where the different group tags, whichever you have allocated to individual policy, that will be listed to you. So sales policy has got the sales group tag, likewise for mark, likewise for finance. You can see that. And now what you can do is you can there is an option called as default view. So under the default view, you can just select this rule based by groups. So when you click on that, you can see that what are the groups that you've created. So you've got a group called as a sales group tag. Okay, a name is marketing group tag and a finance group tag. Okay, these are the different group names that you have, and there is all the other policies are going to a none group. So this is basically your different groups that you have, and this number which shows, that means inside this particular group name how many security policy you have currently. You've got only one policy. Likewise, in marketing group, you have got one policy. In finance group, you have got one policy. And this is basically, it says that, in which particular sequence number the sales group tag or marketing group tag is located. So it is sales group tag is part of sequence number 4, like that, right? So I think it is clear as of now. Okay, so more into it, discussion will be happening under that later part, but hope understandable thing is how to create those different component using groups, and how to work with that. So if I look into you can append the rule, right? When you append the rule over here, you can say add new rule after the mark policy, right? So that will fall under this particular mark group. Okay, so any rule that you create now is part of that mark group. So likewise, for sales group, let us select that sales group. This is my sales policy, right? And under that, I can click on add and write down that particular security policy, which will be part of your sales group. So for individual groups, you can click on and add your individual security policy based on that particular groups. So I hope it is clear so far. I hope you understand the concept of security policy overall. What are the different features Palo Alto provides. Thank you for joining. Please practice the same. If there is any queries, please reach back to us. We'll be happy to assist you. And we'll be seeing you shortly in the next lecture, where we'll discuss regarding the other features of your Palo Alto firewalls, and in this particular video series. Thank you for joining. See you in the next video.